Namaste and welcome to Geobrief by Shom. Which topics are we going to discuss in today's episode? Shehbaz Sharif and Netanyahu's UNGA speeches, the Ladakh protests, the Agni-P missile, US-Turkey relations, and more. So let's begin with Shehbaz Sharif's UNGA speech. At the United Nations, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif once again repeated his false claims of victory. Addressing the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Sharif stated that Pakistan had shot down 7 Indian aircrafts during Operation Sindoor. Standing at the UN without any evidence, Sharif made such false statements in an attempt to claim victory in the war and portray Pakistan as superior in aerial combat. While completely overlooking its hand in the terrorist attack in Pahalgam, Sharif labelled India's retaliation as aggression and tried to present defeated Pakistan as a resilient defender. Taking advantage of tensions between India and the US, the Pakistani Prime Minister also left no opportunity to praise Trump. He repeated Trump's false claims of brokering a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, even calling him a man of peace, and announced that Pakistan has nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. While India has refused to bow down to Trump's bullying and continues to ignore his tantrums, Pakistan is busy showering him with praise. This alone tells everything about Pakistan's sense of self-respect. Further, regarding India's suspension of the Indus Water Treaty due to Pakistan's support for cross-border terrorism, Sharif created much hue and cry at the UN, calling it illegal, a unilateral act of war by India, and a violation of international law. In short, Pakistan tried to project itself as a victim, India as the aggressor, and Trump as a peacemaker. All three of these claims are entirely false. Pakistan is not a victim, but a terror-sponsoring state. India is not an aggressor, but a defender of its national security. And Trump's claims are baseless. India has already made it clear that no third party was involved in pausing Operation Sindoor. As for Shehbaz Sharif's claims of victory, they were outright dismantled by India at the UN itself. Mocking Pakistan, India stated that if its destroyed bases appear to Pakistan as a sign of victory, then it is welcome to enjoy it. India categorically rejected Pakistan's false claims about downing Indian jets and Trump's mediation claims, while reiterating its zero-tolerance approach to terrorism. In this way, India delivered a fitting reply to Pakistan at the UNGA.
Now, after Sharif's speech, let us also talk about Netanyahu's speech. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, during his address at the UN, defended Israel's military actions in Gaza. He described them not as aggression, but as acts of preemptive self-defense. He highlighted the threats posed by Iran and its proxies in the region. Netanyahu brought with him a large map on which Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Yemen were all marked in red. He referred to these regions as a curse. These are the areas where Iran's proxies are active: Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Shia militias in Syria and Iraq. Netanyahu, in an unapologetic tone, spoke about dismantling Iran's axis of resistance. He stated clearly that Israel would see to it that Hamas in Gaza is completely eradicated. He accused the UN of being biased and rejected calls for a ceasefire. Sharply criticizing Iran, he asserted that its nuclear program must be destroyed at all costs, calling it not just Israel's problem, but a problem for the entire world. He reiterated that during the 12-day war in June this year, Israel had destroyed Iran's missile stockpiles. He called for UN sanctions on Iran to be reinstated and praised US President Donald Trump for his bold and decisive actions. In a unique move, Netanyahu wore a large QR code on his suit. Scanning it opened a website containing videos and pictures of Hamas's October 7, 2023 attacks. He urged the entire world to unite against jihadist terrorism. To emphasize the shared threats faced by America, Europe, and Israel, he also brought a placard with a multiple-choice quiz, through which he tried to convey that Iran's terror axis is a universal danger and that Israel is fighting it while protecting everyone else. Overall, Netanyahu's entire speech seemed like an attempt to rally support for Israel amid its growing diplomatic isolation. This isolation was clearly visible when many delegates from different countries walked out of the hall even before Netanyahu began speaking. They boycotted his speech in protest against Israel's military actions in the region. At the same time, more and more countries are recognizing Palestine. But since the United States continues to stand firmly with Israel, these developments are not making much of a difference to Israel.
Now we will discuss India's train-based launch of the Agni-P missile. India successfully tested the Agni-P missile in a launch conducted by the Defense Research and Development Organization. For security reasons, the launch location was not disclosed. The released video shows a rail-based launcher at an undisclosed site from which the Agni-P was test-fired. The rail-based test was successful. The Agni-P hit its target with pinpoint accuracy. India demonstrated its capability by successfully integrating the missile with rail platforms. Like Russia, China, the US, and North Korea, India can now quickly launch long-range ballistic missiles from railway systems. This will strengthen India's credible deterrence. India had already tested a nuclear-capable variant of the Agni missile in 2021. Think of canisters mounted on trains, each containing surface-to-surface ballistic missiles capable of delivering a nuclear payload 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers into enemy territory. India has developed this capability. This successful train-based launch makes our nuclear triad more robust. Having an indigenous, all-weather, fire-and-forget system that can be rapidly deployed will enhance India's tactical and strategic strike options. By using its vast 70,000 kilometers railway network, India can relocate missiles quickly anywhere within the country. This will be a game changer for strategic mobility. In a volatile neighborhood, this adds another versatile system to India's arsenal to deter potential threats and aggression.
Next, let us talk about relations between the United States and Turkey. Recently, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met US President Donald Trump at the White House. This bilateral meeting is being seen as a reset in US-Turkey ties. Erdogan, who visited the White House after 6 years, held a long discussion with Trump. The last time Erdogan came to the US was in 2019, and that meeting had ended in failure. Trump was angry at Turkey's actions against US-backed Kurdish forces in Syria. He halted trade talks with Turkey and imposed sanctions, which worsened relations between the two countries. Ties deteriorated further when Turkey purchased the S-400 defense system from Russia. Then the US removed Turkey from the F-35 program. Because of Turkey's policies on Syria, its anti-Israel stance, and its growing closeness with Russia, no improvement took place in relations. Now, however, Trump is trying to mend ties with Turkey. As a NATO ally, Turkey's strategic location and influence in the Black Sea cannot be overlooked. Turkey supplies drones to Ukraine and had also mediated the grain deal between Russia and Ukraine. Moreover, after the end of the Assad regime in Syria, the new leader Ahmad al-Shara is acceptable to both the US and Turkey. Turkey is also keen to rejoin the F-35 program and wants to acquire upgrades for its F-16 fighter jets. Trump sees this as a business opportunity, especially since countries like India, Canada, Spain, Portugal, and Switzerland have rejected America's F-35 aircraft. Trump also wants Turkey to stop importing oil from Russia and instead increase its trade with the US. Turkey has already signed a deal to purchase 75 Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircrafts, which will boost US exports. Additionally, Turkey signed a 20-year LNG supply deal with Swiss trader Mercuria, under which Turkey will receive US-sourced LNG. This will reduce Turkey's dependence on Russia. Further, Turkey has set a target to raise bilateral trade with America to $100 billion. All these developments have made Trump quite pleased. Known for his transactional foreign policy, here Trump sees both economic gains and an opportunity to contain Russia. For now, Trump has secured some quick wins, but sustaining ties with Turkey will be challenging. The unresolved S-400 issue, Erdogan's human rights record, Turkey's ties with Hamas, and its anti-Israel stance will continue to complicate long-term US-Turkey relations.
Next, let's discuss Trump's latest tariffs. US President Donald Trump has announced new pharma tariffs. From October 1, all branded and patented pharmaceutical products imported into the US will face 100% tariffs. Generic drugs, however, have been exempted. Trump does not want a flood of low-cost foreign drugs in the American market. He wants medicines to be manufactured within the US. So by imposing tariffs, foreign drugs are being made uncompetitive. As we know, under his America First agenda, Trump aims to boost domestic manufacturing and reduce dependence on foreign suppliers. These new tariffs on pharmaceuticals are designed to incentivize production shifts to the US. Any pharmaceutical company that sets up manufacturing plants within America will receive exemptions from these tariffs. Likewise, countries with which the US already has trade agreements will also be exempt. Trump is using tariffs across various sectors as leverage in ongoing trade negotiations to extract concessions. Sectors such as steel, automobiles, furniture, and now pharmaceuticals have all been targeted. These latest tariffs will also impact India, since India is a top pharmaceutical exporter to the US. However, because most of India's exports consist of generic drugs, which are exempt, the immediate impact on India will be limited. But if the US and India fail to reach a trade deal, the shift of manufacturing to the US could hurt India in the long term. Trump is targeting India on multiple fronts: 50% tariffs on goods, higher H-1B visa fees that affect services and remittances, the cancellation of the sanctions, waiver on the Chabahar port, and now pharmaceutical tariffs. That said, India won't be the only one affected. In the short term, the US itself will also feel the consequences of these pharmaceutical tariffs. Drug prices in America will rise, and Trump may face the political fallout of this decision in the upcoming midterm elections.
Next, let us discuss the youth protests in the Philippines. Much like in Nepal, similar youth-led protests have erupted in the Philippines. The issues are the same. People are fed up with corruption. Seeing the luxurious lifestyles of politicians' children on social media has fueled massive anger. Private jets, designer goods, and top brands, all these dynastic privileges, are seen as the result of looted public funds. On one hand, the elite Nepo babies shamelessly flaunt their extravagant lifestyles, while ordinary citizens struggle even for basic facilities. Inequality is enormous. The government was supposed to build climate-resilient infrastructure to prevent floods, but massive corruption took place in these projects. As a result, devastating floods during the monsoon season caused loss of lives and property. Outrage over corruption in flood control projects pushed people into the streets, demanding accountability from political leaders. The House Speaker and some other officials were forced to resign. In some places, the protests even turned violent, leading to police crackdowns. Observers are drawing parallels with Nepal. What happened there? Gen Z discontent and student agitations. A similar pattern is now visible in the Philippines. Youth frustrated by corruption and government mismanagement, mass mobilization, and eventually violence. The difference is that, in Nepal, there were explicit demands for regime change, whereas in the Philippines, the focus has been on reforming contracts and ensuring accountability, rather than overthrowing the government. Still, in both cases, the ostentatious lifestyles funded by corruption and flaunted by Nepo babies have been a major trigger for public anger.
Finally, let's discuss the protests in Ladakh. Violent demonstrations broke out in India's Union Territory of Ladakh over demands for greater autonomy. Leading the protests was climate activist and educator Mr. Sonam Wangchuk, who has long been at the forefront of the Ladakh for Ladakhis movement. Since the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, the state of Jammu and Kashmir was bifurcated into two union territories: Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Union Territory of Ladakh. Ladakh has no legislative assembly and is governed directly by a lieutenant governor. Wangchuk has opposed this centralized control, demanding full statehood for Ladakh and constitutional safeguards under the 6th schedule to protect the region's unique tribal identity, land, and fragile environment. Under his leadership, large-scale protests were organized, but they suddenly turned violent. The government claimed that Wangchuk's provocative statements incited unrest. To prevent the situation from worsening, Wangchuk was detained under National Security Act 1980 and moved out of Ladakh to Rajasthan. Given Ladakh's proximity to China, any unrest in the region carries national security implications. With China rapidly building infrastructure near the border, India too needs to expand its critical infrastructure in the area. The central government fears that devolving power to local authorities could cause delays and hinder these projects. Action has also been taken against Wangchuk's NGO. It is called the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh, SECMOL in short. Following irregularities found in a CBI investigation, the Home Ministry revoked SECMOL's FCRA license. The Foreign Contribution Regulation Act governs foreign funding of NGOs in India. With its FCRA license cancelled, SECMOL can no longer receive foreign donations or use previously received funds without government approval. It can't even reapply for a new license for the next 3 years. Since SECMOL relies heavily on international funding, its operations will be significantly hampered. The government argues that such measures are necessary to prevent foreign powers from influencing India's internal affairs through NGO funding, thereby safeguarding national sovereignty and stopping external interference. Over 6,000 NGOs lost their FCRA licenses last year alone. However, Wangchuk's supporters see this as an attempt to silence dissent. As of now, the atmosphere in Ladakh remains tense. With that, we come to the end of this episode of GeoBrief. Thank you for your time.